The Alpha King arrived to arrest Vale at 9 in the morning. 12 armed royal guards sealed her gate while Lord Veric accused her of hiding missing wolf children. King Kale reached for the warrant, and Mara's gray donkey quietly raised one back hoof behind the chief witness. At 9:01, Bramble kicked Lord Veric into a cabbage patch. At 9:02, the witness tried to stand, slipped on a cabbage, and accused the donkey of treason. Mara leaned against her garden gate. She had expected trouble from the injured fox refusing breakfast. She had not expected 12 royal guards, one purple-faced border lord, and the Alpha King standing among her cabbages while her gray donkey prepared a second constitutional offense. "Bramble," she warned. The donkey lowered his back hoof. Lord Veric crawled out of the vegetables with mud on his velvet coat and half a cabbage leaf stuck to his hair. "That animal attacked me!" Bramble showed his teeth. "He disagrees with your tone," Mara explained. Every guard looked at the donkey. The donkey looked back with the calm confidence of a creature who paid no taxes and feared no throne. Then the Alpha King dismounted. Mara had seen King Kale Arden only on silver coins. On the coins, his nose was straighter, his hair was neater, and no donkey considered the distance to his ribs. In person, he was tall enough to make her cottage door look apologetic. A black cloak fell from broad shoulders, and the silver wolf clasp at his throat marked him as clearly as the quiet pressure of his power. Every wolf shifter felt that pressure. It was the instinctive command of the strongest alpha in the kingdom, a cold current under the skin telling knees to bend and eyes to lower. Mara's knees considered it. Then Bramble sneezed on the king's boot. The pressure vanished from Mara's awareness beneath the urgent need not to laugh. Kale looked down at the wet mark on polished leather. His face did not change, but one of the younger guards made a sound like a cough being strangled in infancy. "Your donkey," the king observed, "has unusual manners." Mara explained that Bramble had been raised in the forest. "So were wolves." "Wolves have better mothers," she replied. The king's pale gray eyes lifted to hers. For one dangerous heartbeat, the yard went silent except for the drip of mud from Lord Veric's sleeve. Then the corner of Kale's mouth moved. It was not quite a smile. It was the memory of one, quickly arrested for improper conduct. Veric did not notice. He was busy pointing at Mara with the dramatic fury of a man who had rehearsed his accusations in a mirror. "Your Majesty, this woman has mocked royal authority, assaulted a nobleman through a trained beast, and concealed evidence of illegal hunting." Mara glanced at Bramble. "You trained?" The donkey began scratching his neck on the gatepost. Kale removed one glove. "Mara Vale, forest warden of the eastern boundary?" "Former forest warden. Lord Veric dismissed me last winter." "For disobedience," Veric inserted. Bramble's ears flattened. Mara put one hand on his neck before he could edit the nobleman's other side. "For refusing to approve 6 logging permits in protected denning ground." The king's gaze shifted between them. Kale had a stillness that was not peaceful. It was the stillness of a blade laid on a table, doing nothing because nothing yet required cutting. "Lord Veric reports that protected animals have disappeared from these woods," he said. "He also reports blood, chains, and restricted wolfbane tincture stored in your barn." Mara asked whether Veric had searched her barn. "His men observed evidence through an open wall," Kale answered. Mara looked toward the barn, whose walls were solid stone except for a ventilation gap no wider than her wrist. "Lord Veric's men must be very thin." The younger guard coughed again. His commander, a severe gray-haired woman, elbowed him without looking. Veric drew himself upright, though the cabbage leaf remained in his hair. "I have never harmed a protected creature. I have never entered her property without lawful cause, and I have certainly never laid a hand on a wolf child." Bramble moved faster than dignity. Mara caught his halter just before his hoof completed another argument. The donkey strained toward Veric, nostrils wide, while the Lord stumbled backward and used a royal guard as furniture. Kale's eyes narrowed. Does he always do that? Mara explained that Bramble only kicked people he disliked. Kale observed that the dislike seemed personal. Bramble has excellent instincts. Bramble is an animal, Veric snapped. The donkey stopped straining and became perfectly still. Mara knew that stillness. I would step farther away, she advised. Veric stepped farther away. Kale studied Bramble for another moment, then turned toward the barn. We will inspect the evidence. Do you have a warrant? The question made 3 guards blink. Veric laughed. Kale merely faced her again. I am the king. That is a title, not a warrant. The gray-haired commander closed her eyes briefly, perhaps in prayer. Kale's expression remained controlled. Under the Northern Protection Act, the Crown may enter private land when there is immediate risk to a child. Mara knew the law. She had quoted it at Veric's men often enough to make them hate nouns. She also knew refusing would reveal more than allowing the search. She opened the gate. Fine, but wipe your boots. 12 royal guards stared at the mud path. Before entering the barn? Kale asked. Mara pointed at the brush. Before entering anywhere. Kale looked toward the stone building. It is a barn. It is my barn, she reminded him. Bramble nudged the boot brush toward the king with his nose. Thus the ruler of 7 northern packs wiped his boots under a donkey's supervision. He had won the Grey Pass and broken 3 border sieges, but Bramble remained unimpressed. Mara decided the morning was improving. The barn smelled of hay, mint, old wood, and medicinal salves. Sunlight crossed it in pale bars. A swallow dropped straw onto Lord Veric as he entered. The forest was generous when it chose sides. Kale saw the chains first. They lay coiled beside a work table, narrow enough for young wrists and lined with leather to prevent visible injury. Beside them stood 3 brown bottles of concentrated wolfbane tincture. Dark stains marked the floor. The king's power sharpened. This time Mara felt it like ice pressing behind her eyes. Veric spread his hands. As I told you. Bramble, who had followed despite not being invited, bit the back of Veric's coat. Remove that animal, the Lord yelped. Mara reminded him that Bramble lived there. So do fleas. One does not invite them to a royal investigation, Veric replied. Bramble pulled. Velvet tore with a noise of expensive despair. The guards developed an intense interest in the rafters. Kale crouched by the stain and touched 2 fingers to the wood. He raised them to his nose, and the wolf behind his eyes moved closer to the surface. Blood, Kale said. Mara confirmed it. The king smelled his fingers again. Wolf, she nodded. His voice hardened on the final conclusion. Young. Mara's throat tightened. Yes. Veric looked triumphant. Arrest her. The sound came from beneath the hay before Kale could move. It began as a whimper and became a snarl too deep for the small body producing it. A black and brown shape burst from behind the stacked bales, hit the floor badly, and scrambled toward Mara on 3 legs. Every sword in the barn left its sheath. The young wolf panicked. Its fur stood in uneven spikes. One foreleg was bandaged, and an iron suppression collar hung loose around its neck. Its eyes were milky with drugs and terror. When Kale's guards formed a wall, the pup snapped at empty air, trapped between the instinct to submit to stronger wolves and the certainty that stronger wolves meant pain. Kale reacted as an alpha king had been trained to react. Down. The command struck the barn like thunder. The swallows exploded from the rafters. Veric flinched. The guards lowered their gazes. The pup screamed. It was not a wolf sound or a human sound. It was both, torn together. The little body convulsed as half a shift rippled through it, paws twisting toward fingers before snapping back. The collar flashed with a sick green light. Mara moved before anyone could stop her. She stepped between the pup and the king, dropped to her knees, and gathered the snapping animal against her chest. "No more commands," she said. Kale's voice turned dangerous. "Move away. It is unstable. So is Bramble. We accommodate." The donkey brayed from behind Veric with such perfect timing that one guard's sword dipped. Mara pressed her cheek to the pup's rough fur. The creature bit her sleeve, not hard enough to break skin, and shook with frantic effort. She breathed in through her nose and out slowly. Fear entered her like winter water. That was what her gift did. It did not erase pain. It gave pain somewhere else to go. The pup's memories came without images. Iron, smoke, shouting, the sting of a needle, other young voices crying in darkness. Mara took the edge of it into herself. Her heart raced. Her muscles tried to run. She kept breathing and hummed the same tuneless note she used during storms. Around her, the barn softened. The little wolf's jaws released her sleeve. Its twisted paw became a hand for one heartbeat, small fingers clutching her shirt, then settled back into fur. "Easy, Pip," Mara whispered. "No cages. No men with hooks. Only an overdressed king who does not know when to lower his voice." Silence followed. Kale's commander looked at the roof again, although there was no longer anything interesting up there. The Alpha King stared at Mara. Then Pip sneezed. The sneeze sprayed wolfbane mucus across Kale's polished boot, directly over Bramble's earlier contribution. The younger guard made the strangled cough again. His commander muttered, "Thomas, if you die from holding in laughter, I will list the cause as stupidity." The tension cracked. Mara sat back on her heels, still holding Pip. "The bottles are medicine. The chains came off children. The blood is from wounds I cleaned." Veric recovered first. A convenient story. Bramble's teeth closed on the remaining tail of his coat. "Commander Elowen," Kale said without looking away from Mara, "remove Lord Veric from the donkey." The gray-haired woman considered the arrangement. "Which one, Your Majesty?" For the first time, Kale's mouth visibly twitched. Veric did not find this funny. He found even less humor in being led outside while Bramble followed with a strip of purple velvet hanging from his teeth like a victory banner. Kale stayed in the barn. He dismissed all but Elowen and knelt several feet from Pip. Without the cloak and the crown-bred stillness, he looked less like a monument and more like a tired man trying not to frighten a child. "Where did you find him?" he asked. Mara told him about the wire snare near the old charcoal road. Kale's next question was quieter. "Why did you not report it?" Mara looked toward the open door. Veric stood in the yard loudly explaining to a guard that the loss of his coat constituted damage to the dignity of the border. "Report it to whom?" Kale's jaw tightened. She continued before he could defend a system that had never defended her. "The local warden's answer to Veric. 2 months ago I found a girl with the same collar. I sent word. Men came before dawn, took her, and later claimed she never existed." "Her name?" "Lena Kaur." Elowen went still. Kale's eyes changed. He knew the name. "She was reported drowned," he said. "She was afraid of deep water." The king looked at the chains, the bottles, the drugged pup in Mara's arms, and the nobleman outside wearing cabbage as formal decoration. "How many children?" "7 here. More missing." Pip made a small warning sound when Kale shifted closer. The Alpha King stopped immediately. That mattered to Mara more than she wanted it to. Kale told her she remained under investigation, though she would not be taken to Veric's cells. Mara called that generous and asked what happened if she refused to reveal where she had found Pip. Kale glanced toward the yard, where Bramble had cornered Lord Veric against the well and was preventing him from reaching his horse through the simple method of existing sideways. "I suspect transportation would become complicated." Mara looked at him carefully. "Was that a joke?" "No." From outside came the crash of a bucket, Veric's shout, and Bramble's triumphant bray. Kale sighed. It may become one. They left at noon. Lord Veric wanted to accompany them. Bramble wanted Lord Veric to fall into the well. In the interest of diplomacy, Kale ordered Veric back to his estate and assigned 2 guards to watch him. The lord climbed onto his horse with half a coat, 1 muddy boot, and the stiff posture of a man storing revenge in several internal cupboards. "Your Majesty," he called, "I warn you that the woman is dangerous." Kale looked at Mara, who was adjusting Pip's sling across her chest while Bramble tried to eat the map from a guard's hand. "I have noticed," the king replied. Mara was almost certain he meant the donkey. Almost. The party entering the forest consisted of Mara, Kale, Elowin, 4 guards, Pip, and Bramble. They had gone less than half a mile when Bramble left the road. "The trail is north," Kale said. Mara assured him Bramble knew. Kale watched the donkey vanish east. "He is walking the other way." "He also knows east," she replied. Bramble pushed through a wall of hazel. The guards stopped. Kale stared after the gray hindquarters disappearing into leaves. "Call him back!" Mara cupped her hands around her mouth. "Bramble!" The donkey continued east. "Effective," Kale noted. Mara assured him the donkey had heard. "That was not the concern," he said. Mara ducked under the branches after him. Pip's warm weight rested against her ribs, and the pup had finally fallen asleep. Behind her came the rustle of royal cloaks meeting shrubs for the first time. Kale caught up within 20 paces. His cloak had collected 3 burrs. The king did not know this. Mara decided not to tell him until the number became politically significant. "Why are we following the donkey?" he asked. Mara explained that Bramble smelled something. "Wolves have better noses." She glanced back at him. "Then why are you following me?" His gray eyes narrowed slightly. "Because you are under investigation." Bramble stopped and looked back. The donkey scraped 1 hoof through the leaves. Mara pointed. "He does that when someone is saying something foolish. Your animal cannot understand speech. He understands you." Elowin made a sound behind them that might have been a cough. Thomas, the young guard, was no longer pretending. He turned his laugh into a violent inspection of a tree trunk. Kale's dignity survived, but it required effort. They continued east. The forest grew thick and wet around them. Ferns brushed Mara's skirts, moss climbed fallen trunks, and the air smelled of pine resin, mushrooms, and last night's rain. Somewhere high above, a woodpecker hammered at bark. Bramble moved with surprising purpose, pausing to sniff roots and stones. After an hour, Kale reached for the lead rope. "We are losing daylight." Bramble took the rope between his teeth and pulled. The Alpha King had stopped cavalry charges. He had held the western gate against 30 feral wolves. He had once dragged an injured soldier across a frozen river. The donkey moved him 6 feet into a blackberry bush. Mara grabbed Pip with one hand and covered her mouth with the other. Elowin ordered the guards to maintain discipline, but she delivered the command while facing away. Kale emerged slowly. A leaf clung to his hair. His cloak had reached 7 burrs and a small twig, approaching ceremonial status. "Do not," he told Mara. She protested that she had not said anything. "Your face has." Mara informed him that her face was not subject to royal command. "I am beginning to understand that nothing on your property is," he replied. Bramble released the rope and walked on, satisfied. They found the first camp before sunset. It lay in a hollow behind a screen of young fir trees. The fire pit was cold, but not old. Ash still smelled faintly of grease. 4 narrow cages had been pushed beneath a canvas cover, each fitted with iron rings and leather straps. Broken glass glittered beside a crate stamped with the mark of a southern apothecary. Mara felt Pip wake against her chest. The pup began to tremble. Kale smelled the air. Wolfbane, bitterroot, something else. Red frenzy. Eloin said. She had opened one of the bottles and held it carefully away from her face. It forces partial shifting. It also makes young wolves attack anything moving, Mara added. Thomas examined the cages. The humor had gone from his face. Why? Because frightened buyers pay more for something that looks dangerous, she answered. Kale moved through the camp without speaking. His anger did not erupt. It settled. Mara had seen winter do the same thing to a river, turning movement into a hard surface capable of carrying terrible weight. Near the fire, Bramble sniffed a pile of discarded cloth. He pawed once, then picked up a torn glove. The leather bore Veric's silver thorn emblem. Eloin took it. Household issue. His guards wear these. Or someone wants us to believe they do, Kale said. Mara's exhaustion sharpened into fury. You think I planted an entire camp? Kale warned that obvious evidence was sometimes placed where investigators were meant to find it. Mara pointed out that Bramble had found the glove. Your donkey finding evidence does not improve its legal weight, he said. Bramble walked over and dropped the glove on Kale's boot. Then he stepped on it. Thomas turned away again. Mara shifted Pip's sling. You came here expecting a poacher. You found a child, cages, drugs, and your lord's mark. How much evidence does a low omega need before it weighs the same as a nobleman's sentence? Kale's gaze snapped to her. Your rank is irrelevant. Only to people whose rank is never used against them. The words landed harder than she intended. Kale's face went blank in the royal way. Every emotion escorted behind locked doors. And hiding 7 children from the crown protected them how? They are alive. For now. What happens when one loses control near a village? What happens when your supplies fail? What happens when you take more fear into yourself than your body can bear? Mara went still. He had recognized her gift. Most alphas saw only an omega calming a frightened pup. Kale had seen her hands shake afterward and the sweat cooling at her neck. He had noticed her measured breathing, while Pip's panic still echoed in her blood. That is my risk, she said. The children are mine. His voice was quiet, but the wolf in it filled the hollow. Pip whimpered. Kale immediately stepped back and lowered his eyes. That mattered too. Bramble walked between them, shoved his head against Mara's shoulder, then crossed to bump Kale in the chest. The king barely moved. Bramble bumped harder. What is he doing? Kale asked. Mara translated the shove as criticism of their wasted time. For once, we agree, the king said. They searched until dusk. Behind the cages, Eloin found wheel tracks leading south. Mara found a child's carved wooden bird beneath a blanket. Kale found 6 short pieces of rope, each cut rather than untied. Someone had left in a hurry. They camped in the hollow because Pip could not travel farther. The guards produced bedrolls, dried meat, and a folding shelter for the king. Bramble entered it first and lay on the ground cloth. Eloin solemnly offered Kale a smaller tent that remained unoccupied by hostile forces. The king accepted defeat and slept there. Mara lay near the fire with Pip against her stomach. Insects clicked, an owl called, and Bramble snored inside the conquered royal shelter. Across the flames, Kale cleaned his boots, while Mara falsely warned him about mist mud. His slow glare made her smile. He accused her of enjoying his suffering. Mara reminded him that he had arrived to arrest her, which still did not explain Bramble. Nothing explained Bramble. For a moment the firelight warmed the hard planes of his face. He looked tired. Not weak, never that, but worn in places no sleep reached. Pip stirred. Kale's gaze dropped to the child. Lena Cor's report reached my council 3 months ago, he said. Veric's office claimed she fell from a ferry during relocation. Mara pointed out that the eastern stream had no ferry. I know that now, Kale said. Mara traced one finger over Pip's ear. Do you? His jaw flexed. The report had 6 signatures. Mara told him paper would patiently hold any lie written neatly enough. Kale glanced toward the royal tent. And people? People kick, she replied. From the royal tent came a loud snore. Kale glanced toward it. Apparently. The next morning, Bramble refused to return to the road. He stood beside the southern wheel tracks, ears forward. When Mara tried to lead him west toward the hidden shelter, he pulled south. The children come first, she told him. Bramble tugged again. Kale crouched by the tracks. These are fresh. How fresh? Less than a day. Pip began making small, anxious sounds in the sling. Mara knew what Bramble smelled. Not lies. Not guilt. Familiar fear. They moved another child, she said. Kale stood. Elowen, take Thomas and one guard to Mara's shelter. Confirm the other children are safe. The rest follow the tracks. Mara shook her head. Pip needs the shelter. Then you go with Elowen. Bramble won't leave the trail. The king looked at the donkey. Bramble looked back. Can anyone else lead him? Mara handed Kale the rope. Bramble immediately sat down. Donkeys did not sit gracefully. Bramble folded in sections, ending with all four legs pointed in directions that suggested an accident. Kale stared at the rope in his hand. Mara took it back. Bramble rose. Elowen's mouth tightened at the corners. A clear chain of command. Kale ignored her. We all follow the tracks. The trail led through dense woods to an abandoned charcoal road, then turned toward the rocky hills. By midday, they heard wheels. Kale raised one hand. Everyone stopped except Bramble, who continued until Mara wrapped both arms around his neck. Below them, a covered wagon jolted between the trees. 2 armed men rode beside it. A third drove. Faint whimpers came from beneath the canvas. Kale shifted. One moment a man stood beside Mara. The next, a massive black wolf occupied his place, silver touching the fur around his muzzle. His pale eyes remained unchanged. Bramble inspected him. The alpha wolf gave a low command to stay. Bramble sniffed his tail. Kale leaped down the slope before the diplomatic relationship worsened. The attack lasted less than a minute. The black wolf struck the first rider from his saddle without biting. 2 guards took the second. Mara ran for the wagon while Bramble followed, braying loudly enough to convince every bird in the valley that the end had come. The driver snapped the reins. Bramble accelerated. Mara had owned him for 8 years and had never seen him run that fast. He became a gray argument with hooves. He passed the wagon, turned across the road, and planted himself in front of the horses. The horses stopped. The wagon did not. Its front wheel struck a stone. The driver flew into a bush. A crate slid from the back and burst open, releasing dozens of metal feeding bowls that rolled down the road with a clatter, like a kitchen fleeing war. Kale shifted back beside the wagon, naked except for the travel cloak Elowen threw at him without looking. Mara noticed. She was an adult woman with professional priorities, so she noticed efficiently and returned her attention to the children. There were 2 in the cage beneath the canvas, both half-shifted and drugged. One had fox-red fur along his arms. The other was a tiny girl with wolf ears pressed flat against tangled blonde hair. Mara climbed inside. No commands, she warned Kale. He fastened the cloak. I learned. The red-haired boy snapped at her. The girl crawled backward until the collar chain pulled tight. Mara's gift stirred, reaching for their terror. Kale caught her wrist before she could touch them. Kale insisted she help one child at a time. Mara protested that both were frightened. And you are already carrying Pip, he reminded her. She tried to pull free. His grip was gentle and absolute. You cannot help them if you collapse, he said. Mara hated that he was right. She hated more that his thumb rested over her racing pulse and knew exactly how frightened she was. Kale released her and sat on the wagon floor several feet from the cage. He turned slightly sideways, making his large body less threatening, and placed the key where the children could see it. My name is Kale, he said. His voice held no alpha force now. I made a loud mistake yesterday. Mara informed me of it in detail. The little girl's ears moved. Mara crouched beside him. He is trainable. The donkey disagrees, From the road, Bramble brayed. The red-haired boy made a sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh. It took an hour to free them. By then, Mara knew their names, Corin and Elsie. Kale knew Corin liked carved birds, Elsie hated boots, and neither child would drink from a metal cup. Elwyn returned with news that the hidden shelter was safe and brought blankets for the rescued pair. She also brought Kale's spare clothes. "Your Majesty," she said, handing him the bundle, "the next time you shift without warning, I recommend choosing a location with fewer witnesses." Kale accepted the clothes. "Noted." Thomas looked intensely at a tree. Mara looked at Bramble. Bramble looked at Kale's bare ankles. The king took the bundle behind the wagon. Kale observed that her donkey was judging him. Mara assured him Bramble judged everyone. "He does it with unusual concentration." "You are wearing a curtain," she replied. Elwyn walked away before her composure became a casualty. The captured driver was less amused. His name was Hask. He wore no house emblem and claimed he had been paid by a stranger at an inn. When Kale asked where he was taking the children, Hask swore he did not know they were inside the wagon. Bramble approached him. Hask went pale. "Keep that thing away from me." "He is only an animal," Kale reminded him. Hask looked at the donkey's hooves. "That animal assaulted Lord Veric." "Allegedly," Mara said. Bramble smelled Hask's boots, then his coat. He did not kick. Instead, he grabbed the man's sleeve and pulled until a small leather token fell onto the road. The soles of Hask's boots were packed with red clay streaked by tiny silver flakes. Elwyn scraped a sample into an evidence pouch. No such soil lay along the charcoal road. Stamped into it was a fighting pit surrounded by silver thorns, Veric's emblem. Hask began explaining rapidly. The donkey had planted it. The token belonged to his cousin. He had found it in a pie. Bramble lifted one back hoof. Hask confessed before the hoof landed. Elwyn took notes while Thomas searched the wagon. Kale stood beside Mara, arms folded. Kale admitted the animal might understand speech. Mara explained that Bramble understood fear, sweat, familiar smells, and men who hid food in their sleeves. "How does that explain Veric?" "Bramble remembers the scent of anyone who has hurt an animal," she said. Kale turned toward her. "Veric has been near him before? When I found Bramble, he had a Veric estate brand burned into his shoulder." The old scar was almost hidden beneath gray hair. Kale crossed to the donkey and touched the edge of it carefully. Bramble did not move. Kale said Veric had denied ever owning donkeys. Mara explained that Bramble had considered the statement personally insulting. "His method of appeal is unconventional. The local court stopped accepting his filings," she said. Kale's laugh escaped before he could prevent it. It was brief and rusty, as if the sound had been locked in storage with old furniture. Everyone nearby went quiet. Even Bramble turned his head. Kale's expression closed. Mara pretended she had not noticed. "We should move before Hask finds another pie." The king looked at her for a long second, then nodded. But the laugh stayed with her all the way to the hidden shelter. The shelter was a limestone cave behind a waterfall, so narrow and unimpressive that most travelers dismissed it as a wet cliff. Mara had built a wooden walkway behind the falling water and sealed the cave entrance with woven willow. Inside, warm lamplight shone across pallets, medicine shelves, and a cooking fire vented through a crack in the stone. 6 children rushed Mara at once. Pip nearly fell from his sling in the collision. Mara disappeared beneath arms, tails, blankets, and one child who had apparently decided her shoulder was a chair. Kale stood at the entrance. The children sensed him. Joy vanished. Bodies stiffened. A bowl hit the floor and rolled in a slow circle. The smallest child, a brown wolf pup named Nessa, ran directly toward the most dangerous alpha in the north. Kale froze. Nessa ran past him, seized the edge of his black cloak, and dragged it toward her sleeping pallet. The king looked down at the child. The child pulled harder. Mara explained that Nessa liked soft things. Kale objected that the item was a royal cloak. She cannot read embroidery, Mara said. Nessa wrapped herself in the hem and lay down. Kale remained standing because moving would drag her across the floor. Corin joined her. Then Elsie. Pip climbed from Mara's sling, limped over, and curled against Kale's boot. Within 2 minutes, the Alpha King had become the central support of a blanket fort. Thomas entered, saw his ruler, and walked back out. Elowyn surveyed the arrangement and offered to retrieve another cloak. Kale refused. She suggested a chair. He refused that too. The Royal Council papers? Kale looked at her. Elowyn's face remained grave. You have always wanted meetings to be shorter. Mara turned away to hide her smile. Bramble entered the cave, inspected the children, and lay on the remaining length of cloak. Kale closed his eyes. The children kept him trapped through supper. Mara cooked barley stew while Elowyn organized watches and the guards repaired the broken door latch. Kale sat on the cave floor with Nessa asleep against his thigh. Using Hask's key ring and Elowyn's pliers, he removed the suppression collars one by one. Every time a collar fell away, the cave seemed to breathe. He remembered their names. Mara tested him while handing out bowls. Mara asked about the twins. Kale identified Orin by his blue string and Orla by her enthusiasm for biting. They both bite. Orla enjoys it, he clarified. From across the fire, Orla smiled with all her teeth. The quiet boy? Seth. He dislikes onions and men with red beards. Seth pointed at Thomas, whose beard was brown. Close enough, Kale told him. Thomas accepted this judgment and moved to the other side of the cave. Mara sat beside the king. You read the missing reports. Kale had read every missing report that reached him. Mara pointed out that he had never come. The reports said families were retrieving runaways. Others described accidents, drownings, and fever deaths. His gaze settled on the children around the fire. I signed condolence letters. Mara heard the shame beneath the words. It did not excuse the failure, but it was not the indifference she had expected. Someone rewrote the truth before it reached you, she said, and I accepted clean paper over a dirty pattern. Nessa made a small sound in her sleep. Kale adjusted the cloak around her without waking the child. The gesture was careful enough to hurt. Mara had spent years believing power made people careless. Perhaps it did. Yet this king sat on stone because a frightened child had stolen his cloak. He would not risk waking her merely to stand. Bramble, who had been chewing hay near the cave wall, walked over and sniffed Kale's shoulder. Everyone watched. The donkey did not kick him. Kale raised one eyebrow. Have I passed? He may only be saving energy. Bramble rested his chin on the king's head. Kale endured this for 3 full seconds. Then he looked at Mara. Remove him. She reminded him that he was the Alpha King. I have no authority here. Now you're learning, Mara said. Rain arrived before midnight. It struck the cliff in silver sheets, filled the waterfall until it roared over the entrance, and sent cold water creeping along the lowest edge of the cave. The children woke one by one. Thunder rolled through the stone. Nessa began to shift. Her small body arched beneath Kale's cloak. Fingers became claws, then fingers again. Terror poured from her in a sharp, sour scent. Mara reached her first. Look at me, little moon. Nessa could not. Her eyes had gone yellow and wild. Mara opened herself to the child's fear. Lightning, iron, a wagon roof. Men laughing every time thunder made the cages shake. The memories hit Mara hard enough to steal the cave from her sight. She held Nessa anyway, breathing through pain that was not hers, and had somehow become hers the instant she touched it. Someone supported her back. Kale. He did not command. He did not reach for Nessa. He sat behind Mara on the whetstone and let her lean against his chest while she carried the child through the storm. When Nessa finally went limp, asleep rather than unconscious, Mara's own strength vanished with her. Kale caught her before her head struck the floor. "I am fine," she murmured. Bramble appeared from the darkness and pushed his nose against her knee. Kale looked at the donkey. "Is she lying?" Bramble shoved Mara flat against the king's chest. "Traitor," she whispered. "An unusually clear answer," Kale said. He carried her to an empty pallet despite her objection that she had legs. Bramble followed and removed one of her boots with his teeth. "Stop helping," Mara told him. The donkey removed the other boot. Kale covered her with a blanket. "Your command of him remains impressive. He expresses love through disobedience. That explains several members of my council." Mara laughed, then regretted it because every muscle hurt. Kale sat beside the pallet. Rain thundered beyond the cave, but his voice stayed low as he asked how many times she had taken the sharpest part of a child's episode. Mara answered that he had arrived without a warrant and therefore did not get numbers. He looked as if he wanted to argue, but Bramble had placed himself behind Kale and was breathing warmly down the king's neck. It was difficult to maintain royal severity while a donkey inspected one's ear. "I am sorry," Kale said instead. Mara blinked. Kale apologized for seeing an unstable wolf in the barn instead of a frightened child. Mara observed that most alphas would have done the same. "I am not most alphas," he said. Bramble nipped his hair. Kale's eyes closed. "Your donkey disagrees with everything." "Not everything. He likes oats." A rare shared principle. The next thunderclap shook dust from the ceiling. Nessa slept on, one hand curled around the edge of Kale's cloak. Mara watched the king watching her. There was no pity in his face. She would have hated pity. There was anger, but it was aimed beyond the cave, toward the men who had taught children to fear storms and chains. Underneath it lay something quieter and more dangerous to her peace. Care. Mara admitted she had expected the crown to classify the children as feral. Kale acknowledged that some officials would. "And you?" she asked. Kale glanced around at the pallets, the medicine shelves, and 9 sleeping children who had turned his cloak into public property. "I would classify them as children." Bramble stopped chewing his hair. The donkey stepped around Kale, sniffed his chest, and then wandered away. Mara smiled faintly. "That may be approval." Kale complained that the approval lacked ceremony. Mara offered to have Bramble kick him for clarity. "This will do," he decided. By morning, the lower trail had flooded. Everyone returned to Mara's cottage because the cave had food for children, not 10 adults, and an animal who ate like weather. Kale's guards occupied the barn. Thomas fell asleep against a flour bin and woke with 08s written across his forehead in charcoal. No one confessed. Kale received Mara's late father's bed, where his feet hung over the end and the mattress contained a hill. Bramble watched through the window until Mara announced that the king had no inappropriate intentions. The donkey immediately pushed inside and knocked over the wash basin. Kale wrestled Bramble back through the window while Mara tried not to admire the effort. When he caught her looking, she studied the ceiling. It did not help. Elwyn saved them by entering with news. The guards assigned to Veric had been found in his stable. One had been drugged, and the other had accepted enough silver to retire badly. Veric had vanished during the storm. His formal accusation had been dispatched before he fled. According to the statement, Mara had abducted the children, manufactured evidence, assaulted transport workers, and bewitched the Alpha King through forbidden Omega influence. Elwyn had also brought copies from Veric's apothecary clerk. For 6 months, the estate had purchased wolfbane, bitterroot, and red frenzy in quantities no lawful infirmary could justify. Thomas had checked the transfer reports at the border archive. Their royal seals were genuine, but every false relocation order carried the countersignature of Veric's steward. Mara looked at Bramble, whose front half remained in the room. He forgot the donkey. The donkey receives 2 pages, Elowin corrected. Lord Veric describes it as a trained instrument of political intimidation. Bramble brayed. Kale pushed him out the window. For once, the report is accurate. The king read the accusation twice. Then he placed it on the wet floor where Bramble immediately stepped on it. Veric believes we are still searching the eastern camp, Kale said. We will let him continue believing that. The plan was simple by royal standards and alarming by everyone else's. Kale sent a sealed message claiming Mara had confessed. At sunset, a decoy wagon would carry the captured children toward Veric's estate for formal identification. In reality, the children would remain in the cave with Elowin and most of the guard. The wagon would contain Kale, Mara, Thomas, and Bramble. Why the donkey? Thomas asked. Bramble stood on his foot. Operational necessity, Kale answered. At dusk, they set out under a low gray sky. Mara sat in the driver's seat beside Thomas. Kale hid beneath the canvas. Bramble stood inside because he had refused to be tied behind. Every few minutes, the king moved the donkey's tail away from his face. This is not workable, he said. Mara kept her eyes on the road. He needs room. Kyle pointed out that Bramble already had the wagon. Mara reminded him that he was occupying the donkey's space. It belongs to the crown, he said. Bramble's tail slapped him. Thomas bit his lip so hard, Mara feared royal service might kill him. The ambush came at the old stone bridge. 6 masked men dropped from the trees. One seized the horses. Another climbed onto the driver's step and ordered Mara down. From beneath the canvas, Kyle asked, Are all 6 close? The attacker frowned. Who said that? Bramble answered by backing into him. The man fell from the wagon. Kyle burst through the canvas in wolf form, taking half the cover with him. Thomas drew his sword. Mara ducked as a crossbow bolt struck the seat. The fight might have remained organized if Bramble had respected the difference between allies and geography. He charged backward out of the wagon, knocked one attacker into the stream, dragged 10 feet of canvas across the bridge, and wrapped it around another man's legs. Kale pinned the leader. Thomas disarmed 2 men and then had to leap aside because Bramble returned carrying a branch longer than the wagon. Mara struck the final attacker with the flat of a shovel. Silence settled. A red flare hissed from the wooded ridge above them. Kale looked up in time to see a 7th man turn a horse west toward Veric's land. The hidden signalman had never joined the fight. Thomas started after him, but the wounded prisoners and frightened wagon horses made pursuit impossible. Thomas stared at her weapon. Was that in the plan? The shovel is always in the plan. Kale shifted back and accepted a blanket. I may add that to military doctrine. The captured leader gave them the mine location before Bramble reached him. He also admitted the flare was a warning. Veric's standing order was to burn the mine records whenever a transport failed. The old silver mine opened beneath Veric's western ridge. The entrance had been hidden behind stacked timber and thorn bushes. From inside came torchlight, men's voices, and the unmistakable metallic howl of a child forced halfway between forms. Kale sent Thomas for Elowin. Then he and Mara went in. Bramble followed. No, Mara whispered. The donkey followed more quietly. The tunnels smelled of wet stone, lamp smoke, blood, and the bitter chemicals used to provoke shifting. Iron cages lined the first chamber. Beyond them stood a circular pit with sand on the floor and benches rising around it. It was not merely a transport station, it was an arena. 2 young wolves crouched in the pit wearing shock collars. A handler stood above them with a control rod. Wealthy spectators had not yet arrived, but servants laid wine cups along the benches as casually as if preparing for music. Kale's fury filled the tunnel. Mara caught his arm. If you release alpha pressure, the children will feel it too. His whole body shook with the effort of restraint. "Then I use my hands," he said. He moved. Without the crushing force of his rank, Kale fought like a man who had learned every possible way to end violence quickly. He broke the handler's rod, put 2 guards on the ground, and caught a third by the back of his coat before Bramble could kick him into a cage. "Alive," Kale told the donkey. Bramble looked offended by the restriction. Mara ran into the pit. The 2 children snapped at each other, driven by the collars. She could not calm both while the devices remained active. "Locks!" she shouted. Kale tore the control box from the wall. The collars went dark. Fear crashed into Mara from both children. She dropped between them, one hand on each trembling body. The mind vanished beneath borrowed memories, roaring crowds, pain, hunger, the smell of another child's blood. Her knees hit sand. Kale's voice reached her without command. "Mara, stay here. I am here. Tell me what you smell." It was an odd instruction, but she obeyed. "Smoke, iron, your ridiculous soap." Kale defended the soap as a diplomatic gift. Mara advised him to return it. "I cannot insult the Southern ambassador," he said. The absurd conversation gave her a rope back to herself. One child stopped snarling. The other began to cry. Then Bramble crashed through a side door. He had tried to turn around in the narrow passage, caught a harness on his saddle, and dragged an entire shelving unit behind him. Bottles shattered. Ledgers and papers flew through the air. One thick account book landed at Kale's feet. Silver thorns decorated the cover. Kale picked it up. Inside were names, payments, dates, and the official numbers of missing child reports. Beside each name was the amount paid to Veric's estate. Bramble sneezed in the chemical dust. "Gray investigator submits evidence," Kale murmured. Mara laughed despite the tears on her face. Boots thundered in the upper tunnel before Eloin arrived. Warned by the flare, Veric had reached the mine through an estate passage. He entered with 8 guards carrying oil jars and torches, prepared to destroy the records. Then he saw the king holding the ledger. For one instant, his polished expression broke. Then it rebuilt itself. "Thank the moon," he cried. "Your Majesty, you found her operation." Mara almost admired the size of the lie. Veric pointed at her in the pit. He claimed she had used her calming gift to train the children, forged his emblem, bribed his men, and lured the king into a trap. His guards shifted uneasily, but several royal soldiers arriving behind Eloin heard enough to look uncertain. The old prejudice did the rest. A low Omega who could alter emotion frightened people. A nobleman with paperwork comforted them. Kale climbed into the center of the arena. He did not announce Mara as his mate. He did not demand belief because he was king. He did something far more damaging to Veric. He explained. The missing reports had been altered through Veric's office. The camp glove matched household issue. Hask carried an arena token, and the red clay on his boots matched the mine floor. The apothecary copies documented the drug shipments. The ledger listed dates, payments, buyers, and children. Eloin added that the relocation orders carried genuine royal seals, but Veric's steward had countersigned every false transfer. Thomas produced the captured attackers from the bridge, including the leader who had admitted the flare was meant to summon Veric. Finally, Bramble walked toward Veric. The Lord backed away. "Control that animal." "He is only a donkey," Kale reminded him. Veric drew a knife. Bramble kicked it from his hand. The knife spun across the sand and landed point first in one of the nobleman's expensive boots between 2 toes. Veric screamed without injury but with impressive commitment. His guards surrendered. The public hearing took place 3 days later in the border square because too many families had lost children for the truth to remain behind palace doors. Veric wore plain prison clothes. Mara wore her old green coat. Kale wore his crown, which Bramble regarded as a suspicious bowl. Witnesses spoke. Parents identified collars and carved toys. The rescued children remained under guard at Mara's cottage. Nessa sent Kale a drawing of a long-legged black wolf with 6 apparent tails. Veric denied everything. He declared he had never entered the mine. Bramble walked into the hearing. A murmur moved through the crowd. Elowin had insisted the donkey be admitted as supporting investigative personnel. The court clerk had objected until Bramble stood near his desk and breathed on the forms. Now Bramble sniffed Veric's coat. He did not kick. Veric smiled. "You see? Even this absurd animal knows I speak the truth." Bramble bit the coat near the collar and pulled. The lining tore open. A brass key fell onto the stones. It carried the mine's number and the silver thorn emblem. For a moment, no one moved. Then the court clerk wrote very quickly. Veric stared at the key. That was planted. Bramble lifted one hoof. Veric stopped talking. Real justice involved seized accounts, restored names, and tired clerks requesting correct spellings. Veric lost his title, lands, and freedom. His estate became a recovery home for rescued children. The investigation also uncovered older records. Mara's mother had served at a royal nursery for unstable young shifters. She had been an Omega Calmer, too. 30 years earlier, several noble families had argued that Calmers weakened proper alpha authority. The nursery closed. Its workers were scattered, demoted, and erased from official histories. Mara read the files twice. There was no secret noble father or hidden crown. Her mother had been an ordinary woman with a useful gift whom powerful people found inconvenient. Kale offered to restore her mother's title, then learned she had never possessed one. Mara refused to let him turn an ordinary woman into a noble merely because the truth made nobles uncomfortable. She wanted the nurseries reopened, the Calmers paid, the children protected, and her own warden post restored. Kale reviewed her qualifications. Insulting a king, concealing 7 children, assaulting traffickers with a shovel, and employing a donkey in a criminal investigation. Mara folded her arms. "Is that a refusal?" "It is a list of qualifications." By autumn, the Eastern Refuge had proper beds, medicine, paid staff, and 3 royal regulations specifically forbidding children from using the Alpha King's cloak as construction material. The regulations failed. Kale visited every week. At first, he claimed he was inspecting crown-funded repairs. Bramble scraped the ground. Then Kale claimed he needed updates on the children. Bramble scraped harder. On his 5th visit, the donkey chased him around the herb garden after Kale stated that Mara's company had nothing to do with his schedule. The Alpha King crossed the cabbage patch at full speed while 6 recovering children shouted advice. Thomas shouted for Kale to run left. The king called the advice useless. "It was useful when you were a wolf," Thomas replied. Mara leaned on her shovel and laughed until her ribs hurt. Kale finally stopped beside the barn, turned, and faced the donkey. "I come here to see Mara." Bramble stopped. "I think about her when I am away." The donkey lowered his ears. "I am aware that she is difficult." Bramble advanced. Kale corrected himself. "Independent." Bramble waited. "Brilliant, infuriating, brave, and entirely unimpressed by me." The donkey considered this, then walked away to eat rosemary. The children cheered. Mara remained by the shovel, suddenly unable to remember what hands were for. Kale crossed the garden more slowly this time. No crown. No guards close enough to hear. Autumn sunlight lay warm across his dark hair, and a smear of mud marked one sleeve where Bramble had nearly cornered him. Kale admitted he had intended to say those things privately. Mara reminded him that Bramble disliked private dishonesty. "I have noticed," he said. Mara looked toward the donkey. "He did not kick you." Kale called the donkey's restraint a promising foundation for courtship. Mara observed that his standards had fallen. They were attacked repeatedly, he said. He stopped within reach but did not touch her. He had learned where to stand. Kale could not promise that life near him would be simple. It included councils, territories, old laws, and people who believed every meal required 7 forks. Mara called that uncivilized. He promised to listen before commanding, fund the refuge without owning it, and keep returning if she wanted him. Bramble chewed rosemary. Mara waited. The donkey did nothing. He thinks you mean it, she said. Kale's gaze stayed on hers. This is the only statement today I was not afraid to have him test. Mara took the front of his muddy shirt and kissed him. For 3 excellent seconds, the world contained sunlight, Kale's startled breath, and his steady hand at her waist. Then Bramble pushed between them. Mara blamed the oats, though Kale pointed out that they lay in the opposite direction. He also expresses jealousy through disobedience, she explained. Kale looked at the animal occupying the space between them. That explains several members of my council. Mara laughed against his shoulder. Winter brought the opening of the Eastern Young Wolf Refuge. Families filled the yard, children ran between new cabins, and Kale prepared to award Bramble an honorary title. The clerk unrolled the document. The clerk named Bramble Royal Advisor for Border Security. Bramble ate the bottom of the document. The clerk stared at the missing paragraph. Kale looked at Mara. Does that constitute acceptance? He may be requesting revisions. A nervous official stepped forward to complain that royal funds should not be spent honoring livestock. Bramble turned. The official immediately admitted he had taken 3 sacks of oats from the refuge supply shed. Eloin signaled 2 guards. The crowd laughed as guards removed the official. Bramble climbed onto the platform and tried to eat the silver trim from Kale's cloak. Kale rescued the fabric. Your advisor is insubordinate. Your advisor, Mara corrected. Young wolves played without collars. Nessa wore a section of royal cloak, while Pip ordered Thomas to surrender with a wooden sword. Thomas obeyed. The yard smelled of pine smoke, hot bread, and winter air. It was noisy, untidy, and nothing like a palace. Kale reached for Mara's hand. Bramble watched. The king paused. May I? Mara looked from the donkey to the man who had arrived with an arrest order and stayed to rebuild what his kingdom had failed. You are asking me or him? At this point, both. She put her hand in his. Bramble did not kick anyone. For nearly 5 minutes, it was the most peaceful royal ceremony in Northern history. Thank you for listening. If this story grabbed your heart, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss our next story. We'll see you in the next one.